Tonight on CTV News, another major fire in Christchurch, and we speak to Labour leader Phil Goff. Welcome to CTV News, I'm Canetta Knight. A boarding house on the edge of Christchurch's central city cordon was destroyed by a fire overnight. The blaze is reported to have begun just before 4 a.m. Firefighters were still at the scene at 10 this morning and were still dampening down hotspots. No one was hurt in the fire, and the officer in charge told us there was no one living in the building at the time. The fire is believed to be suspicious. Firefighters were inside the building this morning and had found the spot where the fire started, although they were unsure how it started. Firefighters on the scene stopped the fire spreading to neighbouring properties. Around 30 firefighters and 7 fire trucks were on the scene at the height of the fire. Leader of the opposition Phil Goff visited CTV offices today. Emily Cooper asked him about the budget and what he would have done for Christchurch.
Firstly, what brings you to Christchurch?
Well, we spent the morning at the CPIT looking at the issue of trade training, because we've got a huge rebuild job here in town. I don't need to tell Canterburyans that. 10,000 homes, 100,000 to be repaired. And I'd really like to see young Canterburyans given the opportunity to do that. 10,500 unemployed. We want to train those young people to let them rebuild their own city. That's really important.
Okay, great. So can you just give me a brief rundown on your thoughts on the budget?
The budget? Well, it had no plan. I think everybody's agreed on that. And when you've got a $16.7 billion deficit that they've built up in just 1 year, you've got to have a plan to get out of it. And running down KiwiSaver and selling off our community-owned assets, that's not a plan. That's the wrong road. So we needed to have something about skill training that I mentioned before, research and development so that we're a smart economy, and ensuring that, if there has to be sacrifice, because that debt is just unsustainable, at least it's shared evenly, fairly, proportionately across the community, not all dumped on low and middle income earners.
So where do you think the money for the rebuild should have come from?
Oh, for the rebuild for Christchurch, look, the money had to be in the budget for that. We all have an obligation as Kiwis to help Christchurch rebuild. That has never been in doubt, and there's never been opposition from Labour on that. Some of it comes from reinsurance, some of it comes from borrowing, some of it comes from reprioritising. We've got a holiday highway just north of Auckland. You don't need to spend $1.4 billion on that when you've got to rebuild New Zealand's second biggest city.
And Pete Smith gave Goff a quick-fire 10-question quiz.
What's more important for New Zealand in 2011? We win the World Cup or you win the election?
For the country, that we win the World Cup. For me, probably winning the election.
Most inspirational person in your lifetime?
I think if you're looking at international figures, it'd be somebody like Nelson Mandela. A man that spent most of his life in jail, that came out of jail, was able and capable of forgiving and bringing his country together, even if he did beat us in that World Cup game.
Increased support for regional television, you see that as a priority?
I think regional television is really important because it's local, it's about the community, and you don't get that off the networks.
Favourite dinner companion?
My wife. It's
I
rare.
knew you'd say it, you see.
She might watch this program.
If you weren't a politician, what would you be?
I don't know. I run a little farm and enjoy that sort of lifestyle. I'd quite like to be in business, particularly export business. I had 3 years as Minister of Trade. I enjoyed it immensely. It's about selling your country. It's about growing wealth for your country. I'd love to do that.
Would you live in Christchurch now?
I've never lived in Christchurch. I'm a born and bred Aucklander. My apologies to the mainland. I live...
Would you live here now?
Look, I love the city. My son lived down here for a while. He wouldn't have left if they hadn't have transferred him back to Auckland in his job.
We've got Richie and Dan. Should we go after Sonny Bill?
Oh, Sonny Bill's pretty special, and a whole lot of things. Rugby, league and boxing. Very special guy.
What Super 15 team's yours?
It's got to be the Blues.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
They're going okay.
The wrong colour for me.
Too,
and they're doing okay this year, but it's been a while.
Do you know if all your family vote Labour?
Well, my dad does, and he's 90. It's a lifetime habit. He can remember Michael Joseph Savage. My kids all do. My wife does. Maybe there is a few siblings that went astray when they made too much money.
Question 10. If you become Prime Minister, will you ride a motorbike to work?
I do from time
I
to
know.
time.
Would you ride it to work?
Well, not in Wellington. Wellington's not a city for motorbikes. I've got a Triumph Bonneville 850, and much of my life I rode a Norton Commando. It's great fun. It's very liberating being a motorbike rider, except when the car doesn't see you. Then you're liberated in a different sense.
Phil, you got 9 out of 10, which is very good. The Blues let you down.
Yeah, I knew you were going to get me on the Blues, but there you go.
Thanks
Hey, they've got to win sometime.
Thanks very much, mate.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure.
Coming up after the break, the cordon around the city will be reduced tomorrow. Welcome back. The cordon surrounding the city is to be reduced tomorrow. A section of Zone 6 will open from 12 noon. A cordon map is now online at canterburyearthquake.org.nz. That's canterburyearthquake.org.nz. The area encompasses a section of Peterborough Street between Manchester Street and Madras Street. Manchester Street is open for a section south of Peterborough, but is closed at Cambridge Terrace. Cambridge Terrace opens at the east of Manchester Street. Kilmore Street has opened from Manchester Street to Madras Street. The area is being opened so that residents living in homes with green placards are able to move through the area without carrying identification. The completion of debris clearance from the Pine Gould building and from demolition sites north of the red zone in Colombo Street means that large volumes of heavy traffic have also been reduced. The dumping of an estimated 8.5 million tonnes of rubble at Lyttelton Port has been slammed by Labour MP Ruth Dyson.
The government says it's approved the fast-tracking of a 10-hectare reclamation of Lyttelton's port using rubble from Christchurch's earthquakes to assist the recovery. However, the project's been slammed by Labour MP Ruth Dyson.
Yesterday, the announcement was made by Jerry Brownlee and Nick Smith that there was going to be huge reclamation of the coal handling area at the Lyttelton port. He then said, and by the way, we're going to consult with the community about this. The order in council has now been signed off. So the Minister is saying, I'll listen to the views of the community, but I'll do it after I've made the decision. So that was my first concern. It's really offensive to say to a community, your views will be heard, when you've already not just made, but actually publicly announced the decision. People are feeling very frustrated about that. The two specific concerns I have, and I know local people have, with the proposal is firstly that there should be some independent environmental impact assessment done. What happens when you dump that much earthquake rubble into our harbour? Let's make sure that that impact is monitored independently and the public can see. So that was my first concern, and the second one was Norwich Quay is very busy. It's already got a lot of restrictions in parts because of demolition work. 200 additional trucks each day is going to make that area very problematic. I just wanted a proper traffic management plan. I didn't think my asks were very big on behalf of the Lyttelton community. I wrote to Jerry Brownlee asking for those things. He wrote back and said, thanks for your letter, no.
There's an estimated 8.5 million tonnes of rubble and material from the quakes. A normal consent process could take up to 2 years if there were environmental court appeals. Dyson thinks the rubble should still go to Lyttelton, but believes an environmental assessment needs to be looked at.
I think the use of it is fine. Actually, I don't want our rubble to be wasted by being used as landfill when it could be put to a good purpose, but I want it to be environmentally sound.
Environment Minister Nick Smith said the local community board and community associations would be consulted.
Well, the rubble should be checked to make sure that it is clean before it's dumped into the harbour. We don't want contamination in our harbour. I do want to see an independent environmental assessment on an ongoing basis. We have Raupaki right in the middle of that side of the harbour basin. That's a very important traditional area for people from Raupaki. They don't want their traditional shellfish area contaminated, but nor does anyone else in the harbour basin. So let's make sure that whatever goes in as rubble from the quake, let's make sure that it's clean. Let's look at what impact this is going to have on the environment and don't let it contaminate our harbour, and we want to make sure that Norwich Quay is safe with that increased amount of traffic.
As reported in April, there were questions when earthquake rubble was used to reclaim land at the port in March and early April. After the February earthquake under state of emergency powers, Bricks, masonry and concrete cleared from demolished buildings was taken to Cash and Key. The Littleton Port Company was then ordered to stop dumping rubble.
Crime Stoppers New Zealand is aiming to work with Christchurch Police to stop looting in the area. Emily Cooper has more.
Crime Stoppers has been operating in New Zealand for nearly 2 years. The organisation's aim is to assist the police and other law enforcement agencies to catch criminals and solve crime. Crime Stoppers was set up so that if any member of the public has information about crime or criminals, they can give that information to Crime Stoppers anonymously. CEO of Crime Stoppers New Zealand, Lou Gardner, says people often don't want to go to the police because they don't want to be involved, such as being a witness or making statements, or they may be worried about intimidation from the criminal or criminal groups.
Well, what really happened was last week with the news about the looting of the houses up on the Mount Pleasant suburb, and then the press release this week about looting in Christchurch, we decided that Crime Stoppers has been in New Zealand for now 19, nearly 20 months operating, and it's a great way for people that have information about crime and criminals to give that information to the police via Crime Stoppers, so it's anonymous. And because a lot of people don't want to get involved, it may be intimidation, they might be on the fringes of criminal action, so therefore they don't want to get involved. But that allows them to still give that information to the police.
Since its time in New Zealand, Crime Stoppers has taken nearly 13,000 calls and 2,500 messages on their online message form. Crime Stoppers is now working with Christchurch Police to help with the huge spike in burglaries the suburbs have seen and looting.
Yeah, very unfortunate in society. You'd think this would bring people together like tragedies normally do, but unfortunately we have some people in our societies who don't buy into that, and they see this as an opportunity to make money for themselves, and going into houses where people are already down and to really kick them in the head is a pretty despicable way to behave. And I think most New Zealanders, I'm sure most New Zealanders feel the same way, and I'm certain that Christchurch people feel the same way.
Mr Gardner says anyone who feels too intimidated to talk to police should contact Crime Stoppers, particularly if they suspect people of selling stolen goods.
Well, what I say to people is that, people who loot don't loot for their own good. They loot to sell the items. So if there's no market, then they're left with the loot. And the important thing is, I say to Christchurch people, and it's not just Christchurch, close down to Dunedin, all these goods will be getting shifted around to get rid of them. So, ask some questions. And if you've got real suspicions, give that information to Crime Stoppers. If you don't want to go to the police, the obvious choice is go to the police. But as I said, a lot of people don't want to go to the police. So give it to Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111, or go to the website and crimestoppers-nz.org, and you can put an online message form, all encrypted. You'll never be traced, no one will know where the information's come from, and the police can then take some action and get some details, descriptions, names, rego number of car. Let's put some pressure on these people so that they can't sell the loot and make money at other people's expense.
And you can contact Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111, or you can visit their website.
Coming up after the break, your local weather. Welcome back. I spoke to Dr. John O'Malley on City Life about his views on stress.
Well, if you think of, I always take an evolutionary approach when you're trying to understand human responses. Right? Oh, it's the same also. I mean, if you look at things like the horse whisperers and the dog whisperers and all that, they always look about how do these creatures operate in their natural groups, the herd and the pack. And in many ways, we are, just two meals and a big shake away from reverting very much to our evolutionary state. And the tribe and the cave are the two key components of our security. So, if you're looking at, even issues of fertility and things like that, women are looking for a safe cave, a good safe tribe. Now, what's happened in Christchurch recently, of course, is the caves have all started to shake and fall down. So we're no longer feeling that secure in our own homes. We're not even feeling secure about the future of our homes because, although I think the EQC and the government response in general is very good, it's such an extensive program that, of course, people are feeling individually isolated in terms of that response. And the tribe, of course, are the people around us. Now, if I'm stressed because of some response that's happening globally, it's very likely that those very same people around me are also stressed. And therefore, can I rely on them as much as I would have in the past, or as much in my mind as I think I do? And we also tend to catastrophise when we're under stress. So if we think through scenarios, like, you know, is the next earthquake going to be even bigger? You know, my husband or wife, you know, my partner, are they going to be able to respond and continue dealing with the stress they're dealing with? And then this will show up in defence mechanisms. And defence mechanisms come around things in terms of particular emotional states. Anger, for instance, is one that comes out strong as a defence. When we are frightened, we have a couple of standard responses. We either run or we fight. The fight-flight response. And so the emotional states that are behind that are fear and fleeing, or fear can turn into anger. So therefore interpersonal relationships become challenged in these environments.
John Wally from New Zealand Manufacturers and Exporters told Rob Cope-Williams that the budget has got more to it than originally thought.
And you can have an argument about the politics or the underlying politics from the budget. But stand back and look at what's happening. We're in debt, we're sinking in debt, we're borrowing more money, and you can fix that in two ways. You can earn more or you can spend less. Well, the budget did focus a bit on spending less, but it really didn't focus on earning more. And it's not earning more from you and I transacting in New Zealand, it's earning more of New Zealand transacting with the world. And so the export economy is still the abandoned child of the economy. We don't really line up national politics in New Zealand to really think about that.
Do you want some sort of incentives, or do you just want some red tape stripped away? What do you want?
Well, in all budgets we talk about less bureaucracy, less red tape, because who wants those things? You know, everybody doesn't want red tape and they don't want bureaucracy because they're all a waste, aren't they? But one person's piece of regulation is the protection for another person. So who knows actually what is the right pieces to take out? What I want to see is a level playing field. Your previous speaker, Graham, talked about QE2 in the US. Well, QE2 in the US is one of the reasons why exporters in US dollars are earning very little right now. We haven't sought a way of isolating ourselves from other people's decisions. And one way or another, a small economy like New Zealand can be, if it doesn't take control of its own destiny, a cork on the ocean that just goes in one direction or another, depending on what the big players do. And that's not really a way to build an economy.
Both parties seem to be offering very different polls.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think what we've seen is a change from where we've been over the past 25, 30 years in New Zealand, where the two main parties have been battling with one another to stand in the same spot. And we are now seeing them moving away from one another. We are seeing the traditional conservative spend less, small government type of discussions coming from the right. We are seeing a little more in terms of intervention. No, intervention is the wrong word. A little more in terms of real economy discussions coming in from the left. The talk that started in late 2009 with Phil Goff saying that Labour were moving away from the consensus on monetary policy. Well, that's part of that move towards protecting ourselves from what the Americans choose to do in QE1 and QE2. So there are differences coming in, and it pays to look past the rhetoric. You know, that each party has to appeal to its heartland, but really peel it back and look at what the underlying policies are.
I mean, are you suggesting that Labour is becoming centre-left rather than centre-left?
I'm not sure as I can even know what that all means. But what I'm seeing is I'm seeing Labour at least starting to give voice to issues around the real economy. Give voice to the fact that our exporters must succeed, our exporters must earn a good return from the effort they make. In reality, the way that we've set up New Zealand politics is that the export sector has actually carried the weight for the domestic economy in terms of, when you don't earn much from a sheep farm because you don't get a good return on your exports, it's still cheap imports for everybody else. Now, that may not be a good trade-off if you're a sheep farmer. If you're everybody else, you might be quite happy, but we're not getting the balance right, in our opinion.
The importance of actually getting these messages out?
Oh, it's absolutely vital, because it is interesting to say, well, we can get cheap TVs and cheap foreign holidays, and that's great as long as you've got a job. But if we don't have jobs because the economy is suffering in terms of investment and development, then cheap holidays and cheap TVs don't really matter anymore.
And that's CTV News. I'm Canetta Knight.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.